Hello, this is my drunken history of the Nazis. And this is a tale of two fronts. The Nazis have their origins in this split from religion, but it's not anti religious, it's simply anti organized religion, so that the establishment becomes the human rather than the church. And this has its origins in the movement humanism. Um, when Europe went from Dark Ages, medieval church, divine right of kings, into humanistic Renaissance, rediscovering the classics, the beginning of the separation of church and state began. But as humanists, they were still exploring their role in nature, separate from nature, and even separate from God. And the humanists, relying on Cicero, were focusing not just on, godly attributes like compassion and mercy and understanding, but also non-animal attributes like judgment and honor and things like this. And so humans began to recognize their place in the world not as just another creature in the garden, but as heirs to the throne of God, and thus we better start preparing ourselves. And this led to the scientific revolution, where it wasn't just questioning our place, it was questioning everything, and the place of everything, including God. And the scientific revolution, interestingly, the humanists began in Italy and the South and moved, and by the time it got to England, say 200-300 years later, and by 1600s, late 1600s, the scientific revolution came out of England with Newton and Locke, and their questioning of authority and the basis of all substance. In this scientific revolution, this sort of scientific method was applied to the human. And what came from this humanism and this scientific revolution of self-discovery was the enlightenment. And the enlightenment was, of course, the culmination of humanism, in that you are born and then you grow up. And Kurt Vonnegut, he said that he's a humanist, and that means in part that he has tried to behave decently without rewards or punishment after he's dead. Again, this is the idea that writes God out of the equation. Because what has God done? What has the Church of God done? Except bring us to this point where we must realize ourselves separate from it, and yet a replacement for it, not as even something to walk away from and be something completely different, but simply to replace it. Humans have created their own church of themselves, of the idea of humanity. And this strays from the humanism idea, which is the humanists recognize that it is only when people feel free to think for themselves and to interject my own ideas, not have other people think for them, using reason as their guide, that they are best capable of developing values that succeed in satisfying human needs and serving human interests, according to Isaac Asimov, another self-proclaimed humanist. So, enlightenment leads to the idea of there's a difference between the children of God, which is all humanity, and the grown-ups, who are gods, which is in every human. And the enlightenment is this realization that there are differences that naturally occur, and what to do about it. And they still came to the conclusion that all men are created equal. And that means our potential is all the same. It doesn't mean that we all use it the same, or that we all end up the same. It just means we all start out the same. And so this enlightenment, this idea that all humans do not end up equal is a problem. Because, what does an enlightened person do about that? Especially since the enlightened ones tended to be the aristocrats, the rich ones, the ones who came about and offered solutions. Like, what do? And one of them, they began to create nationalism, and they created sort of English enlightenment and German enlightenment and Swiss enlightenment and Scottish enlightenment and American enlightenment and individual enlightenment, so that these ideas began to be discussed. And it was this idea that we're all created equal that created the platform. We all get to have a say. John Locke argued that human nature was mutable, and that knowledge was gained through accumulated experience rather than by accessing some sort of outside truth, it says. And Immanuel Kant summed up the era's motto in the following terms: dare to know, have courage to use your own reason. And so again, it says, with or without God, wherever God may be, it is inside you that matters. And your own perception, your own experience that leads to reality, lower forms and higher forms. And so in comes fascism. And fascism is really a synthesis of religion, this human as God religion, and the idea that you can manipulate humans lower than you, and that your own self-interests is all that matters. And this is where Nazism comes from, in that the ultimate conclusion of the Enlightenment is the cult of personality, and that there's ultimately one human who has the best response to all things. That there's one enlightened human more than all others. And for the Nazis, this was Hitler. And yet for Hitler and the Nazis, this included Marxism and Freudism.
Hello, Moto.
Hello?
Hey, Ryan. Melissa at Tom Finch. How are you?
Not bad. How about you?
I'm good. Hey, we have the cord all ready for pickup for you. And I just was curious. I know you had went somewhere and had some work done. Did they do that check engine light for you?
No, they didn't.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure, because that light was still on, and I wanted to make sure you knew if they had fixed that it was that same code. So, okay, that makes sense. I was worried there for a
Thank
second.
you.
But it is all ready for pickup for you.
Cool. And $300, or what are we talking?
Looks like $146.79.
All right, I'll take it. I'm not going to look a gift horse in the mouth on that one.
All right, we'll see you soon, Ryan.
Or what time you close?
We're here till 5:30.
Sounds good.
If you got something going on tomorrow, fine too.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. And so, yeah, I need to go pick up my car, but in conclusion, the Nazis took that idea of enlightenment to the cult of personality. And this cult of personality is the religion of an individual human who happens to be more enlightened than all the others. And through marketing and programming and catering to two sides and attacking the question of what do we do with this information with a battle of two fronts was their downfall and also their origins. And the Nazis are just one example of what happens when you put humanism, the scientific revolution, enlightenment, and then the cult of personality into practice. Thank you.